Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Orkin Bajik, and today we are going to make an introduction to Python. Over time, our goal is going to be to learn some of the essential functions in Python, and then we are going to see how we can use analytical tools that are available to perform analysis on data sets. Okay, so in today's video, the focus is how can we define an array or a list? How can we initialize the values of this array? How can we print the elements of this array to the screen? And how can we change the values of its elements? So let's look at an example. So I am using the Anaconda Spider software for Python, but I know that there are different options available out there, and it is perfectly fine, whichever one you are comfortable using. And the methods, the language, the syntax will be valid in any of them. But this is the version that I'm using, and I'm going to share a link in the description of the video to help you with how to find the resources to install the version I'm using. So what we do first is, especially in this video, in the upcoming videos, we will be focusing on arrays, and more specifically, arrays that are defined using the NumPy package. Okay, so I used this command here that imports the NumPy package as NP. So this is mostly because there will be sections in which we will have to type a NumPy or call NumPy, and instead of typing NumPy, I will just type NP. This is a typical approach that is used by a lot of the coders out there. Okay, so this is something that we will start with, and then I have a number of comments on the screen, as you see, and this is what we will go over. And the first thing we will go over is, let's create an array of size 10 with all zeros in it. And as you see, there's a pound symbol at the beginning of this statement here, which shows that this is a comment, meaning that Python doesn't take this into account. This is just for your information only. And a good practice in coding is to leave these comments so that when you come back to your code, you know what your purpose was with that set of comments, okay? So let's define an array of size 10 with all zeros in it. So here's what we are going to do. I'm going to define my array as array, okay, with uppercase A. You can name this whatever you want depending on the context. So for example, if you are going to store the salary data, you can name it employee salaries. If you are going to store the age of a number of citizens, then you can name it age of citizens, and so on. Okay, so that's completely up to you, but we will start with array because we are just trying to learn how to use and define these arrays right now. So I am going to define array as all zeros, right? That's because that's what we were aiming for. And the size of the array is 10. So what this means is I created a list named array, and it can take 10 values, and I initialize this array with all zeros in it. Now, let's print this array on the screen. And we will use the print function. And I will say the array is, as you see in quotation mark, it immediately turned green. But the syntax with the print function is, if you have a statement in quotation, that means that it will directly print on the screen. Okay, so the array is immediately going to show up on our screen. So I go to the next row and I will say, okay, I'm trying to print my array, and this comment will let us see the context, the content of this array. So at the top of the screen, there is this green arrow that basically says run the file. So as soon as you hit this, it will save your file. So all your work has been done. Now it is saved. And then as you see, it prints the output of your code. It says the array is all zeros. Okay, exactly what we wanted to do. And as you see, I have 10. So I have 5 here and another 5 here, 10 elements. Okay. Now let's look at a term that will be important in arrays called index. So normally, right, in a typical setting, we would call this value that I'm pointing at as the first element, and then the second element, the third element, and so on. But in Python and in a lot of the programming languages, we don't do it that way. What we do is, this is index 0, index 1, index 2, and so on. So when I say change the first element's value, I'm talking about index 0. Okay? So this is at the beginning a little unfamiliar, but over time you will get used to this terminology and it will become very familiar for all of us. Okay, so I have a comment here that says, let's change the first 3 elements of our array. Okay, so change them to whatever value we like. So again, the first value is going to be represented by index 0. So to obtain that value, what we do is we use the square brackets, and then we put 0. 0 is the index of the array that we are working on. And I'm going to say this is equal to, let's say, for example, 5. So what this will do is it will look for the 0 index, right, or the first element, and then it will change it to 5. Okay, so copy and paste this, okay, or you can type it from scratch. There's nothing wrong with either. And then let's look at the second element, which corresponds to index 1, and I will change it to 7. Okay, these are all random numbers. There's no specific reason, but that is how we change. And then array in square brackets 2 will change the third value to, let's say, 20. Okay, so this is how we update the first 3 elements of an array. So if I ask you to change the 4th element, then you would do array in square brackets 3. Okay, let's print the updated array on the screen. I will say print, and we will say the updated array is, right, go to the next row and then type array, because array is still our list that we are working on. And if we print this, as you see, the first 3 elements now changed to 5, 7, and 20, and all the remaining values stay the same, which is exactly what we wanted to do. Okay, just a quick note, right, as I mentioned earlier. So let's say that I only want to print the first element. And in that case, I would say, let's type it in quotation mark, the first element is in quotation mark and comma, right? This is the syntax. This will immediately show up on the screen, and comma. So we are telling Python that we are giving you another command, and that will be to print the first element of our array. So let's run the code and see what it does. Okay. So again, the updated array is here, and it says the first element is 5. Okay. And if you wanted to see the second element, then you would do array 1 and so on. Okay, perfect. And then what we are going to do is we are going to print the size of the array. At this point, when we define this array, we know that the size of the array is 10, but there may be cases where this is not obvious to us. So let's print it so that Python tells us what that value is. So we will use the print function, and we will say that there are, and close quotation mark, comma, we will use the len function, which takes the input as whatever array or list you are interested in finding the length for. So len is going to give you the length of that array, okay? And then we will put another comma. There are size of the array elements in the array. So what this will do is it will print there are, and then it will calculate the size of this array, and then it will print elements in the array. So let's run this and see what it brings us. As you see at the very bottom, it says there are 10 elements in the array. Okay. So far we learned how to define an array, how to initialize its values, how to identify its index values, how to change certain elements, and how to identify the size of that array. So a couple notes that would be worth mentioning. So as you might have seen, I put spacing before and after the equal sign here. There's no specific rule about it. It's just me being more organized. You don't need to put the spacing in there, and you don't need to leave space between the lines either. I just think that it looks more organized, more readable, and that's just personal preference, but they don't really impact your code at all. Okay, so I hope that this video is going to be helpful to you, and I will see you in the next one.